So wow, there was a lot that went down in this episode, and after last week, the pressure was on Zeke and Carrie as well, because Detective Whitman, he has a chip on his shoulder about his past relationship with Carrie, and you could tell with the way he was showing his obsession and the way he was gunning for Zeke in episode 4. Now, this episode focused heavily on the murder investigation of Jabari on all different angles, with Kane showing his family first, dealing with his business with Mecca, but also making sure he helped Zeke out in any way he could, and when shit went sideways, he went and dropped Ramirez's badge in Tariq's drawer, which is a huge turning point in this whole murder investigation. But elsewhere we saw Drew doing what he could do to protect Zeke, with Diana doing her bit and Tariq as well. But Tariq's so busy and occupied with his own shit and his love life, he could very well find himself in trouble soon. Now Kamal Tate was also brought in on the investigation, which wasn't a coincidence, which we'll get to, and he's also found Jabari's book that he was writing on Tariq. But other than the big story about Kane planting Ramirez's badge in Tariq's drawer, the huge story is all about Zeke. He's not only Monet's son, Zeke is Monet and Dante's son, and when you think about it, there was definitely some signs which we'll get to in this review and recap. But let's start with where this episode kicked off from, and that's with Carrie thinking she was meeting Zeke, but who turned up? Monet, with a gun to the back of Carrie's head. Now we all know Zeke was with Carrie the night Jabari was killed, and he protected Carrie while he was being questioned, but now it was her turn. She now works for Monet, and she wanted to know who killed that professor, which of course, she found out the truth later. But we had various people trying to protect Zeke for their own best interest. There was Monet because of course, we all know now, Zeke is her son. But we saw Tariq protecting Zeke because if he doesn't play ball, then he doesn't stay at Stansfield. So we saw him approaching Davis McLean to be Zeke's lawyer, and even gave him the information that Ramirez's gun was at the scene of the crime, which was not privy to anyone because Whitman told them to hide the information from the media. And this is where he used Sax's relationship with Jenny Sullivan to make sure the story checks out. But in typical McLean fashion, he doesn't ask questions that he doesn't want to know the answers to because he's all about money, and specifically $1 million. Now we also saw the OG Simon Stern, and it was all about Rashad Tate keeping him in the loop about Detective Whitman, which brought Whitman to this meeting. He overheard the conversation between Carrie and Whitman in the last episode, and now knows that Zeke and Carrie were together, and he's connecting all the dots between Zeke, Carrie, and Detective Whitman. But Stern has a vested interest in Zeke because he's the star man at Stansfield, and he wants Whitman to stop harassing him and the university. And Stern made it clear that him and the commissioner are close. And it is no coincidence that Kamal Tate has been brought in on this whole investigation, and something tells me Simon Stern had a hand in this too. But Detective Whitman really sounded obsessed with Zeke in this episode. He was definitely obsessed. He was just trying to connect all the dots back to Zeke no matter what, even though they found Ramirez's gun at the scene of the crime. And the focus really should have been on them trying to find Ramirez, because if they found Ramirez, then you get closer to the answer whether Zeke actually killed Jabari or had Ramirez kill Jabari, and we'll get to that because Kane definitely made a huge move. But while all this was happening with the detectives, we had Monet and the Tejadas on the other side, scrambling to help Zeke in any way they could, and needed the help of Davis McLean, but he's someone who wanted that McLaren. So $1 million was the price for the Tejadas, which was missing from the Tejadas safe, and she went straight for the guy who was in and out repairing their windows because she thought he stole their money. So unfortunately for him, he's no longer breathing. Now we all know Davis McLean doesn't come cheap, but what Monet doesn't know is Diana is working on getting Lorenzo out of prison with the help of McLean, and she's the one who took the money to pay him, so the family had no money. And this is where we saw everybody coming together and helping Zeke in their own way. So let's talk Monet first. She asked Lorenzo for the money by remortgaging their house, and the answer was absolutely not, because Zeke wasn't his kid. Of course, he would have done it for any one of his own kids, but he's not doing it for Monet's nephew. And this is key in Monet's and Lorenzo's relationship, because Lorenzo doesn't seem like he knows that Zeke is actually Monet's son. And when he does find out, it's gonna get seriously complicated, not just with Monet, but with all the kids as well, which we'll get to later on in this video. But with Kane, they showed why he's family first when he told Mecca that he had to help out Zeke, and this is where we did hear Mecca questioning Kane whether Zeke was his brother, but he confirmed that he was his cousin. But Kane does the run for Mecca, as well as raising some cash for Zeke as well, with the help of Brayden of course, who we all know is down for anything, and he's so eager to prove himself not only once, but twice, pulling the lick at the jewelry store as well, which is a throwback to Power Season 3, when we saw Kanan and Jukebox's crew hit the jewelry store. And this is where we actually saw some more smart moves from Kane. He did give Brayden a gun, but he jammed it on purpose, because he didn't need Brayden to shoot anyone and make shit worse. But with Diana, she went to Effie to get some expensive designer clothes with a clone credit card, which they sold to Effie's boostman to raise some money from her end. And here's where we saw her teaching Diana how she does shit, but also we learned a bit more about Effie's background. Diana questioned her about her parents, and Effie said, let's just say, I leave them alone and they leave me alone. And just to add to this, even though it wasn't mentioned in this episode, we also know her mom's was a drunk, something we learned in Power, which she told Tariq. But with Drew, he got the help from Ev and Zeke's basketball teammates, forfeiting a game and starting a GoFundMe page, and he was the one who actually raised the most money out of all of them, as well as laying down a reporter who was bugging Zeke, which didn't go down too well with Monet. And thanks to Drew punching the reporter, they needed to make good with the media outlet that he was working with, and he had to give an interview live on TV, which Davis McLean had the questions for. So we saw Tariq prepping Zeke for this. Now what he didn't know and why they went off script was because Detective Whitman in the background did look into Ramirez, and he found some sketchy info. He found some unexplained payments, and he would have fed this information to the journalist. And Zeke was actually doing so well with this interview until she went off script with the information that Whitman fed to her about him paying Ramirez to kill Jabari. And again, this just shows Whitman's obsession with Zeke in this episode. Even though Zeke had an alibi with the footage of him at the shop, Whitman now made it look like Zeke paid Ramirez to kill Jabari. And this is where Monet found out the real truth when she slapped some sense into Kane. Kane told her how Tariq was the one who went to see Jabari, and when he came out with Drew's name, he popped him. But Tariq was the one who took the kill shot, and it was his idea to leave the murder weapon and frame Ramirez. But she told him they better find Ramirez's body, because if they did, they'd be able to work out he was killed before Jabari was, which of course would clear Zeke, but could potentially come back on Kane. But this is where we saw Mecca teaching him how to handle this situation. Mecca was the one who taught him that he needs a failsafe, just in case he gets caught, and this is where Kane makes his move. So he grabs Braden, who helps him with the body, and of course Whitman, and the detectives find it. And if the body's been there for 2+ weeks, then there's no way he could have killed Jabari, and that means Zeke's alibi checks out, and he wouldn't have paid Ramirez to kill Jabari either. But the badge that we saw Kane keep in episode 9 of the first season came back into play. He wiped it down and put it into Tariq's drawer, and made sure to wipe down everything he touched, and I did not expect this. A lot of people were talking about how Tariq may pin this shit on Kane, but how about Kane pinning it on Tariq? And the worst thing is, this isn't the only thing that could point to Tariq. Kamal Tate found the novel that Jabari was working on, which we didn't see the aftermath of, so that's still to come next week, which could point straight to Tariq. And this situation is going bad to worse for Tariq, because Lauren, she may have to look out for herself. Just like she said in a canonical studies class, she has to be in that situation where she has to protect herself, and she was faced with that situation in this episode when Kamal Tate found the drugs in her drawer. She now has a recorded device which could potentially pick up a dangerous conversation around Tariq. But let's talk about Zeke being Monet and Mecca's son, because this is something I don't think many of us saw coming at all. A lot of people were wondering whether Kane was Mecca's son, but it was already confirmed that he's Lorenzo's, so few thought maybe Drew and Diana could have been Mecca's, but in fact, Zeke is not only Mecca's son, but Monet is his real mom's as well. It seems as if when Zeke was born, she sent him away to live and be raised with someone else from her family, and she built her life with Lorenzo. And now Dante wants to fight for Zeke, and he wants to be there for her and her kids. And this is his other motive that he had for the family. He came back into town because he must have seen Zeke on TV and realized that this is his son. But this shit is about to get real messy, because as far as Lorenzo knows, he's Monet's nephew, and as far as Diana, Drew and Kane know, Zeke is their cousin. It's going to cause a huge divide and split in the family, which is going to be made even worse when Lorenzo learns about the truth. And in the synopsis for season 2, it did tell us that Monet's been keeping some secrets from Lorenzo, and now we know what it is. It's a huge one, which will definitely change the dynamics for the whole Tejada family. So let's see how this plays out in episode 5, which I'm sure will leave us on the edge of our seats. But elsewhere in this episode, we saw Tariq fighting for custody of Yaz, but Grandma Estelle actually delivering some home truths to Tariq, which he definitely needed to hear. She told him that every evil that's befallen on this family is because of him. Just like we said earlier on in the week, Rainer and Ghost's death and Tasha being sent to Witsec is all because of Tariq. He definitely has to take the blame, and I think he's beginning to realize what he's done. And we heard him telling Lauren that everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. And the reason why Tariq is all loved up with Lauren is because Lauren is Tariq's escape from his double life. And you can tell, he definitely feels this normality with Lauren, just like how Ghost did with Angela. So those are the main talking points from episode 4, and by far the best episode of Power Book 2 Ghost so far, and I can only imagine it's only going to get crazier from here. So drop all your comments down below in the comment section, let me know what you thought about the twist, of Zeke being Monet and Mecca's son, and of course, Kane planting Ramirez's badge in Tariq's room. So drop all your comments down below in the comment section, and of course if you're new to the channel and you haven't done so already, then remember to smash the subscribe button if you want to see everything Power Book 2 Ghost and Power Universe related. But as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.